Sports Talk Live Buffalo is sponsored by Celino Law.
All right, hi everyone. Welcome to a special edition of Sports Talk Live Buffalo, streaming on WGRZ Plus. I'm Adam Benini alongside Sports Director John Scott and Hall of Famer Vic Carucci. Here we are in the show tonight, and thinking that we were going to talk about going back and dissecting a very disappointing, gut-wrenching 33-30 overtime loss to the Denver Broncos in the divisional round of the NFL playoffs, the AFC playoffs. Instead, we are talking about the firing of head coach Sean McDermott and the promotion of GM Brandon Beane. Both very significant developments, obviously. We're going to spend the next 30 minutes breaking it all down. Gentlemen, I'll just kind of generally off the top here. How surprised were you by all of this?
I was shocked. I thought for sure that some of the rumblings at the national level over the past few weeks were a little bit overblown, and that this was one of the better coaching jobs throughout the entire season that we've seen in the 9 years Sean McDermott was this team's head coach. I thought more of the blame was to be placed on the roster construction, which would fall on Brandon Beane. And I thought if any sort of a significant move was going to be made, it'd be at the general manager position and not the head coach. So when I started getting calls from work this morning at about 9:30 in the morning, I was floored. But here we are, and it appears in a power struggle dynamic, it's Brandon Beane that won out over Sean McDermott.
Yeah, I won't use the word shocked. I did think that when the Bills beat Jacksonville in the wild card round and the Bills got past the wild card round, I thought that maybe put Sean in the safe place. I did have concerns about his job security if the Bills didn't advance far enough in this postseason. I wasn't quite sure what far enough would mean. We know now it was obviously the inability to get past the divisional round. But I had this sense that the weight of a Super Bowl or bust climate was there for Sean McDermott, was hanging over him or sitting on his shoulders. And I had that feeling before the year even began, and there were, to me, some rumblings that I was hearing in and around the organization that there was this growing sort of tension about that. John Scott mentioned a power struggle, absolutely, and that was also growing during the course of the year. By power struggle, I mean between the head coach and the general manager, and each, guarding his respective turf, if you will. The personnel side for Brandon Beane, and we knew all the second guessing and questions about wide receiver, about the pass rush and so forth. And then Sean McDermott, how much did coaching have to do with this team's inability to get to the Super Bowl? Frankly, given the roster limitations, I thought Sean McDermott might have done one of his better coaching jobs in his 9 seasons with the Bills.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely, Vic. And also, in the press conferences, the Jacoby Myers reference, for example, leading up to the Jacksonville playoff game, you more than got the sense of the tension between the two of them bubbling to the surface, roster construction versus coaching. And then the statement, if we can take that full screen today, the statement that came out tells us a lot today. It isn't always the case with these types of statements, but released this morning, the team quoting owner Terry Pegula, Pegula saying he felt the need for a new structure within the leadership of the franchise to reach the next level, noting that Beane will now serve as the president of football operations as well as GM and lead the search for a new head coach, leading all facets of the organization. That's massive because previously McDermott and Beane had reported to Pegula independently and directly. So when you talk about Beane winning out a power struggle, John, that spells it out right there, doesn't it?
100%. And we'll hear from Brandon Beane at some point in the coming days here. And he will be, by me or whoever else, asked, what was the reasoning for Sean McDermott's dismissal and what was your relationship like? And he's not going to say, oh, we were terrible, but I think the statement and then the actions by Terry Pegula are clear as day. It was Brandon Beane versus Sean McDermott, and Brandon Beane won. And in winning, he not only gets the head coach out the door, but he gains more responsibility and power. And Vic, as you and I discussed throughout the day and earlier, this is somewhat unprecedented for the general manager to have as much power within the organization.
Yeah, it really is. You look at the closest thing I could come up with, John, since that initial discussion we had, is maybe the Falcons now with Matt Ryan in this sort of head of football operations role. But my understanding is they're still going to have a general manager brought in there to run the traditional GM role. But who has the final say on various things, roster and so forth? But we know, of course, Kevin Stefanski was hired, and that was a Matt Ryan move, the former Browns coach in Atlanta. But this is really unprecedented, I think, where the GM is overseeing the coaching staff, and you have those moves, circular, or I should say, flowing up to him, and then to the ownership, to Terry Pegula. Look, there were people who thought, and I was one of them, that Sean and Brandon Beane came as a package deal from Carolina when they were both there, Sean as defensive coordinator and Beane as assistant GM. That wasn't really the case. Sean came in earlier in January of 17. Beane came in after the draft, and of course Sean replaced Rex Ryan, who was fired because the team didn't make the playoffs in 2016, and Sean was the replacement there. And then Beane comes in to replace Doug Whaley. Whaley was fired the day after the 2017 draft, Sean's first draft. And it was interesting because in talking to Beane about that, he wanted to make it clear that they kind of came in their own separate ways, even though they had a relationship in Carolina. And that Beane said if he had to pick a coach and had Sean not been here, a man he was considering, back in at the time, was a former Carolina assistant, and I think to me who wasn't Sean McDermott. I think to me it was an indication he wanted to be his own man in this job.
All right, so we got to pick up the pace here a little bit, but we've got to certainly address the job that Sean McDermott did. I mean, this is an extraordinarily bold move because you're not talking about a coach that failed necessarily, except at the highest possible end, not being able to get past an AFC championship game to a Super Bowl and win it. But what he did in terms of the consistency of winning, rebuilding the culture, which was no small task when he took over this organization. John, I mean, this could backfire in a lot of ways, could it not?
100%.
Considering the Sean McDermott's body of work, I mean.
Yeah, you went 17 years without making the playoffs, and now Sean McDermott, he instantly broke the drought and then made it there 8 of 9 years. The only one he didn't was the rebuilding year to get Josh Allen in 2018. 5 division titles. He only had that one losing season in 18. You got to be careful what you wish for here, and I know some of the player sentiment and their reactions kind of indicating that as well. I mean, he completely rebuilt the culture, and he moved the bar as high as it can go. And I think it rightfully so. If you want to say he underachieved with having Josh Allen and not making it at least to the Super Bowl, I'm absolutely here for that. But it is big shoes to fill to think that you can bring in anyone from this crop of coaching candidates and say they can not only sustain the success that Sean McDermott had at the same level and then surpass it, Vic.
You're replacing 98 victories in 9 seasons. That is a big hole to fill. And there's really no one, I mean, I know we'll get into possible candidates, but there's no one that screams to you that the Bills are going to get that guy, keeping in mind that the power that a named coach, a marquee name, would require may not love the idea of having to answer to a GM who's now head president of football operations. So that will be interesting. The other thought here is, if the idea is to need to get more out of Josh Allen in whatever remains in the Josh Allen window, then maybe it's an offensive-oriented guy versus Sean, who had defensive roots.
You know, before we talk about Josh Allen, because I want to do that before this segment is over with, I do think the relationship between Beane and Terry Pegula needs some examination here. You know what? It kind of reminds me a little bit of what happened with Kevin Adams and Pegula with the Sabres, that comfort level that Pegula seems to cover it. Now, obviously, Bean has had much more success in his role with the Bills than Adams did with the Sabres, but it does speak to Pegula's preference for the structure and some of the impetus behind this decision, doesn't it, John?
Yeah, and it's funny to me, it took him so long to finally kick Kevin Adams out the door for underperforming as poorly as he did, and yet he does that, and then what, a month plus later, he's willing to fire the winningest head coach since Marv Levy and the second best head coach this franchise has ever had. That's surprising to me, because I thought his preference was not to pay people that wouldn't work for him, especially when he had the most stability. That doesn't mean you should just be complacent because this is the best thing that they've had in 30 years. But I think it's interesting that Terry was willing to make this move, and clearly his relationship with Brandon Beane was on firmer ground than it was with Sean McDermott.
Yeah, you know, it's clear that Brandon Beane got Terry Pegula's ear, got into his ear and had his ear more than Sean McDermott did. I think that's very clear. And here's the other dynamic. Are there other voices in this mix now? Keep in mind, this team has added to its ownership investment with the minority investments by Tracy McGrady, Vince Carter, that group that poured in more than $1 billion into the whole mix here. There's Laura Pegula, Terry's daughter, who is a prominent voice in ownership now. So you wonder, how the whole thing is playing out with different people talking with Terry. But the most prominent voice he heard from the football side, clearly Brandon Beane's.
Let's talk about the impact on Josh Allen, because here he is now playing for a new head coach for the first time in his professional career. And what does it say? I mean, look, they haven't been able to get McDermott, couldn't get him to the Super Bowl. There's the whole narrative of you're wasting the prime years of Josh Allen. He's about to turn 30 years old. What does it say? I mean, this move is fueled, I think, to a great extent by that window. What's your reaction, and what type of coach are they looking for, John, to work with Allen in this?
I agree. Vic indicated it a bit earlier. It's offensive. I think that's as clear as day. I think you want an offensive mind that can go hand in hand with your superstar generational quarterback here. And that's what I see happening. We're going to get into some of the names that we think potentially that's going to be. But there's been clamoring for that for years now, as the defense has failed at the end of playoff games, that an offensive coach needs to be side by side with Josh Allen. And I think that's the route they're going to go.
Yeah, and look, I don't think it's a magic wand situation. We know what Josh Allen can do. We know what level he is as a player, and it's a high level of greatness. But I think it's about the overall direction of the offense, and that's what's going to be interesting here is, how much can you change the direction or vision or focus of what Josh Allen has been used to during the course of his 8 seasons with this team.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. Much more to get to, as you mentioned. Let's get into some of the candidates as we continue here on Sports Talk Live Buffalo. Our familiar names involved who might replace Sean McDermott moving forward. You're watching a special edition Sports Talk Live Buffalo, streaming here on WGRZ+.
Now back to Sports Talk Live Buffalo, sponsored by Solino Law.
Back Sports Talk Live Buffalo, streaming here on WGRZ+. Very significant day in the history of Buffalo sports and the history of the Buffalo Bills as they make the decision to fire head coach Sean McDermott, promote GM Brandon Beane, adding president of football operations to his title as well. So what's next? Alongside John Scott, Vic Carucci here, let's kick around some of the candidates. They may or may not have one in-house, an offensive coordinator, Joe Brady. John, let's start there and just kind of see where this discussion goes. How much of a shot does Brady have here?
Well, he certainly has a lot of interest around the league for a second straight year. Just completed a few interviews with other teams for their head coaching vacancies. And what do we know about this? The Bills are constantly looking for someone to link with Josh Allen that Josh Allen likes. That's why Ken Dorsey was promoted. That's why Joe Brady was promoted to offensive coordinator. So naturally, if the relationship between Brady and Allen is as good as maybe we think, or it could be, then maybe it's natural just to promote him and have him lead this team. In my opinion, this is not the direction to go. I think you need a fresh voice in that room and someone that at least has head coaching experience. That is the direction and the place where I think this football team is in. When you have Josh Allen, when you have the Super Bowl or bust expectations, I don't think this is the place where you slide in someone with zero head coaching experience. But Vic, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they just want to continue to keep the pipeline going and keep Josh Allen happy.
Yeah, John, I agree with you. I think it has to be about a fresh set of eyes and fresher ideas. Let's keep in mind, Joe Brady was part of a coaching staff led by Sean McDermott that only got this team so far. And if Terry Pegula truly believes, and just based on the statement, that this is about needing to do better than what they've done and needing to take a next step, Joe Brady was part of the step that only got you this far. So I truly believe that, yes, it's got to be a different person to do it right. The comfort level of promoting from within, it just feels like a lazy way to go with this, and I'm not sure what it achieves, and I'm not sure what it says to a fan base that I think also has some concerns about the direction of this franchise.
Well, some other names being kicked around, and all of it really speculation right now. Clint Kubiak, Seattle's offensive coordinator. Davis Webb, Denver's passing game coordinator. Some history, relationship with Josh Allen. And the other name, Diana Rossini reporting this, but it doesn't take much of a leap to get there, is former offensive coordinator in Buffalo and former Giants head coach Brian Daboll, native to this area, all of those things. He may be available and interested. What are the chances they bring Daboll back, especially given the relationship Johnny has with Josh and the fact of what he did for him early in his career, helping him to get to the level he's at right now?
Yeah, this makes a lot more sense to me than bringing Joe Brady as an elevated thing within in-house here. I'm still also not sold. Dabes did a very good job his first year with Daniel Jones and making things work. I think he did some nice work with Jackson Dart, but part of the reason that he got fired from the Giants was that team's ability to blow double-digit leads this season, and there were just some also in-game things that Brian Daboll was not very good at. And so as many good things as he did as the Bills offensive coordinator with Josh Allen and what he did with the quarterbacks in New York, I'm not saying this would be a bad thing, but I also think that there are other options, again, proven options out there that I think would maybe be a better option if you're going to try to find someone to be better than Sean McDermott.
I have heard the same conversation, and you mentioned the reporting that's been done on this. The reporting that I've been doing today doesn't seem to track with Brian Daboll coming here. It feels more like Daboll is in line for a coordinator position somewhere. I know Philadelphia has shown some interest in that, but as far as bringing him back to be a head coach after what turned out to be a failed experience as a head coach with the Giants, I think that's a harder sell. Frankly, and I didn't get the drift just with a lot of the discussion I had today around the league that a path was leading him back to a head coaching job with the Bills.
So what about a big established championship caliber name? For example, a Mike Tomlin who has come up today, whether he coaches or not this season very much remains to be seen. Bill Belichick, right? A lot of speculation to that effect. It would seem, given Beane's positioning on this, that like a guy like Belichick, John's going to want complete and total control, right? I'm not sure Beane is going to want to give up that ground since he's worked so hard to gain it with this new title now.
100%. I think Vic mentioned it earlier. Anyone who has Super Bowl experience, the big name, those are the guys that as head coaches take a lot of the responsibility from what would be a general manager. And now Brandon Beane has that, and I don't think that he's going to give that up for someone, whether it be Mike McCarthy or it be Mike Tomlin or Bill Belichick. Tomlin is someone that I like. He obviously has a great pedigree. He had some issues in Pittsburgh, but a lot of those came once Ben Roethlisberger was no longer the quarterback, though he is built the same as Sean McDermott. So is there really that big of a difference outside of proving in the past, way in the past, that he can win the big game? I also tend to think that maybe Tomlin is someone that will not coach this season as well. Belichick would be a disaster. I don't want any part of that as well. That's what makes all of this so interesting. I don't truly think there is any solid coaching candidate out there that is a unequivocal better option than Sean McDermott.
Yeah, I don't see the marquee name, if that's what we're going to describe the people in the category we've been discussing here, coming into this job. This is being set up with, again, Brandon Beane's new title, in addition to GM, as President of Football Operations, for an entry-level, first-year head coach, younger guy who is going to come in probably with offensive background. I think that's where the table is set for that seat to be filled.
And it's going to be interesting how that flies with a fan base and moving forward with that lack of head coaching experience, what that really translates to. A lot on the line with a move like the Bills made today. All right, when we come back, where might Sean McDermott land next? That as we continue here on Sports Talk Live Buffalo.
Now back to Sports Talk Live Buffalo, sponsored by Solino Law. Player of the game, sponsored by Blue Star Home Services, Western New York's all-pro HVAC team.
All right, Sabres taking on the Hurricanes this afternoon, and we're going to give a nod to Buffalo's Tage Thompson. 6 shots on goal, played a phenomenal game, but Carolina goaltender Brandon Bussey had the answer, 17 saves, but many of them grade A scoring opportunities. Sabres dropped the game 2-1. They've gone 2-2-1 now in their last 5. They're on the road tomorrow night in Nashville. A couple of minutes left here to wrap up Sports Talk Live Buffalo. I don't think it's going to take Sean McDermott, John, long to find work. And of the remaining NFL head coach vacancies, boy, Pittsburgh and Baltimore feel like they'd be good fits for both sides.
Yeah, I think Sean certainly knows the importance of having a superstar quarterback. Lamar Jackson is just that. So if he's going to attach himself to a new job, he's going to do so with someone that has the quarterback in place. I think there are the pieces on Baltimore's defense that he can work his magic with. And I think there also is something that staying in the AFC and having a shot at the Bills, maybe in the playoffs every year, also is just some added incentive.
Yeah, I think the Ravens would be a logical landing spot. I think Pittsburgh's a possibility too. His former William and Mary teammate, football teammate and friend Mike Tomlin, I understand, is going to advise the Rooneys on making that hire in Pittsburgh. I would think he'd put in a good word for Sean there if he would. But I expect Sean to land pretty quickly, and I do expect him to also get a significant pay bump with his next gig.
All right. Very interesting. A lot still to unfold. I think Sean McDermott, he's made it perfectly clear, it was reported to his staff that he wants to coach and continue coaching. I think that, like I said, it would be surprising if in short order he didn't have employment with another NFL team. Given the success he had in Buffalo and the boldness of this move, and also Buffalo being a very attractive opening now, given Josh Allen's status for an incoming candidate. So a lot to get to as we continue. We'll have it covered here on Sports Talk Live Buffalo. Thanks for being with us. For Vic and John, I'm Adam Benini. Thanks for being